Hello, this is Mike Burek, host and producer of Kreditsia, The Well, a podcast series about interesting and notable Ukrainians from around the globe. Today is Friday, October 4th, 2024. This episode is produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Our guest today is Katerina Goncharova, Country Director for Ukraine with the World Monuments Fund. Welcome, Katerina. How are you?
Nice to be here.
So to start off with, can we talk a bit about your career and your professional background?
Well, I started my professional career in historic preservation in my students here as an assistant of the Committee of Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Ukraine, and later as an assistant of archaeological expeditions with the Institute of Archaeology of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine. Then I realized that my main fascination in life comes from historic architecture and urban heritage. So I worked for the Research and Development Institute for Historic Preservation of Ukraine. I started as a researcher, and then after a series of promotions through years, I was appointed as a director of research department. A couple years prior to the war, I was invited to take a position of deputy director at the Ukrainian Center of Cultural Research for intangible heritage promotion. In parallel, there were many projects with international teams in community engagement, integrated urban development, and so on and so forth. During those years, I had my PhD in historic preservation, and I spent a year as a Fulbright scholar at the University of Maryland, studying public engagement and community engagement and private partnership as a tool to leverage historic preservation matters.
Katerina, what would you consider your most important project before you joined the World Monuments Fund?
Well, that's a very hard question to answer because there were so many of them. And the main thing that all of my project had in common is continuous discovery, regardless if it's an archaeological expedition in the oldest Greek settlement in the North Black Sea shore, or an expedition for documentation of cultural heritage in Luhansk region, or scientific support of the monumental painting at the refectory of Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, or restoration of Kiev Arsenal and Kiev Fortress, or expedition to Crimea for preparation of nomination file for Sudak Fortress. All of them had in common constant discovery, constant study, and constant promotion of cultural heritage of Ukraine.
And what exactly is the World Monuments Fund? And what is its primary mission?
Well, the World Monuments Fund, WMF, is an independent organization devoted to safeguard a world most treasured places, to enrich people's life, and to build mutual understanding across cultures and communities. Uh, Next year, we're going to celebrate our 16th anniversary, and that's actually a really serious milestone. And crisis respond is in the DNA of WMF. This is why, with couple months after full-scale invasion in Ukraine, we started our mission here. But World Monuments Fund has a really broad international network with affiliates in Cambodia, France, India, Peru, Portugal, Spain, and UK, and also builds a lot of partnerships tackling actually issues related to climate change, underrepresentation of cultural heritage, imbalanced tourism, and post-crisis recovery. So in Ukraine, as I already mentioned, we started our mission a couple months after full-scale invasion, and it was due to the really generous gift from Helen Frankenthaler Foundation that laid a foundation to Ukraine Crisis Response Fund at WMF.
Russia's invasion against Ukraine has seen a wide range of attacks on Ukrainian heritage sites since February 2022 in a major effort to erase Ukraine's cultural identity. Would this be considered a war crime? And how has the WMF worked to mitigate the effects of this campaign?
As you may know, last week during the General Assembly of the UN in New York, General Prosecutor of Ukraine, together with a prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, acknowledged that erasure of Ukrainian identity and destructions of cultural heritage is a significant element of a genocidal policy of Kremlin. So, and usually we acknowledge that this war is being fought to destroy Ukrainians as a nation. And part of that is destruction of our cultural heritage. Earlier this year, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Parliamentary Assembly had adopted a resolution in which it recognized Russia's actions as genocide of the Ukrainian people, as well as the need to decolonize Russia. WMF sets its goals in safeguarding and protection of architectural heritage sites in Ukraine affected by military actions. In terms of litigation and accountability, there is a number of other partners and other professional groups working in this direction, namely Lemkin Society. So we see our goal to prevent the erasure of cultural heritage of Ukraine through stabilization of those historic sites that were wounded during this war and to prevent this destruction and basically to keep those most significant sites in connection with the local communities.
As of September 2024, UNESCO officially verified damage to 438 cultural sites in Ukraine, including religious buildings, museums, libraries, and monuments. Is there an international effort to rebuild these sites and institutions?
I would allow myself to make a little step back and to say that it's only UNESCO verified that number of damaged cultural heritage properties. But the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine says that it's more than 1,000 historic heritage sites that were destroyed or damaged during this military action. Almost 2 million museum items that are left on occupied territories, and about 4,000 cultural institutions that had to stop their operation due to the military actions. And as if you just take a look as the latest World Bank RDNA for Ukraine to rebuild all of those laws, it would cost up to $9 billion US. So the losses are really substantial. And of course, we do need a broad assistance from international community to recover. To verify all the damages, WMF, together with Ambassadors Fund for Historic Preservation, continue support damage assessment missions in Ukraine and to support Heritage Monitoring Lab that sends multidisciplinary expeditions to different areas of Ukraine that are most affected by military actions that are suffer the most from all kinds of damages due to the military actions. And that lays a foundation for governmental institutions and for local governments to strategize, to prioritize their next steps, and to basically see a broad picture of what is happening. WMF has supported up to 20 projects in Ukraine right now. One of the most significant one is stabilization of the Kiev Teachers House, iconic dome, because as you may know, Kiev Teachers House housed Ukrainian parliament in early 20th century, where Ukrainian Declaration of Independence, so to speak, or Fourth Universal was declared, laying a foundation for Ukrainian statehood. And the image of this building is so iconic for Ukrainian statehood, for Ukrainian identity, and not only for the urban landscape of Ukrainian capital. We also supported stabilization of Chernigiv Library of Youth because it was one of the first cultural institution and historic sites that was directly attacked by air bombs. And so to keep this treasure in connection with the society to pave a foundation for its rebirth, we supported this project together with Cultural Emergency Response for the Netherlands. Otherwise, we have lots of projects in Odessa, in Kharkiv, supporting local museums like in Ohtyrka. So all of that would allow us to hope for the best and to keep our fingers crossed that eventually we can come up with longer solution how to stabilize and revitalize cultural heritage assets in Ukraine.
So you just mentioned that the estimate to restore all of these damaged sites and institutions is about $9 billion US.
Mm-hmm.
What other sources of funding available for rebuilding these war damaged sites?
Well, there is an ecosystem of international organizations who provide help in the situation of crisis, regardless if it's a man-made crisis like a war in Ukraine, or if it's some environmental issues like hurricanes or floods. So all of those organizations like UNESCO, ALIPH, World Monuments Fund, Cultural Emergency Response, they all are eager to fund whatever is needed in Ukraine. But the main point that the definition of needs also needs to be articulated quite fluently for international donors and institutions who are willing to help, to listen, and then respond. So this is why we're working with the Ministry of Culture and Strategic Communication of Ukraine. We're working directly with our partners on the ground. We're working with municipal governments and regional administration to ensure that the funds that were allocated for Ukraine will be spent wisely. This is why, I mean, like the assistance of international organization, the embassy and national governments all over the world is truly essential.
What have been some of your major challenges as country director for Ukraine with the WMF?
I would say that the work in crisis is really challenging because like every Ukrainian, like all of Ukrainians will live here and experience this absolutely dystopian circumstances daily. Like as you may know, there were numerous drone attacks in Ukraine in September, and not a single night left without sirens. All of it adds up with a no information from a front line, from information from international organization and general politics. It all adds up. So the main challenge is basically living through the war because it results in numerous problems and issues that we're trying to reinvent a recipe how to tackle.
Katerina, unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but I did want to ask you a final question. Do you think Russia's attacks on Ukrainian heritage sites will continue and possibly increase?
Sadly, it's not only about physical impact, but I would also mention propaganda and battles that are being fought on informational battlegrounds, because it's really important for Ukraine to withstand not only physical damage, but also informational damage and the way it's being seen by international community. And this raises an issue of post-war recovery as an internal intention to postpone substantial measures of reconstruction and revitalization. The fact that the current wars and contemporary wars are being fought, we can end up having decades in this really, really threatened environment. But the point is that we need to basically believe in Ukraine. We need to support our people, our nation in its struggle to withstand all of this multi-frontier battle, I would say.
And where can our audience go to find out more about your work?
Please visit WMF.org. Try to find Ukraine Crisis Response Fund, and there will be an exhaustive information about those projects that we have already completed. We do not disseminate information about the project that are still ongoing because of security issues for our partners on the ground. But the vision is quite clear. We're here in Ukraine to provide assistance as much as needed.
Katerina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
I have been speaking with Katerina Goncharova, Country Director for Ukraine with the World Monuments Fund. And I'm Mike Burek, your host and producer of Kneditsia. This episode is produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Until next time, that's all for now.